My name is Sadiq Khan. I'm running through the Mayor of London, and you're listening to Raw.
Welcome to your student radio station, bringing you great shows.
Good evening, welcome to These Charming Men.
The Jam Jar here, I'm Matilda and I'm Meg.
You are listening to Bangs and Mash. This is going to be great.
Oh my God.
Great music.
An era-defining band. New single from Radiohead.
Great interviews.
Hi, this is Frank Turner.
My name is Sadiq Khan. I'm running through the Mayor of London.
My name is Eddie Izzard.
And keep up to date with the
A
arts.
poet, a playwright and a cultural icon. He is, of course, William Shakespeare.
News and politics.
What about if the people are too stupid, though, to make this decision?
People make that decision. That's the entire point of a democracy.
Sports.
So close. He slipped through, he brings it through on his left foot, just over the back of the net.
And on-campus coverage.
When you think of Battle of the Bands, it just offers that real diversity.
Welcome to the big decision.
This is Varsity Rugby.
And Warwick is going to try! Dying moments of the game.
Online and on 12:51 a.m. This is Raw.
My name's Jo Brandreth, and this is Perspectives.
Hello, and welcome to Perspectives here on prime time on Raw till 51am, which hasn't happened before, and I doubt will happen again after people have listened to the show. No, but in all seriousness, we're packed again in the studio. We've got Barnaby, Matt, Dan, another Dan, and James. And James, this is your first time on Perspectives?
It is. It's my debut outing.
It is. How are you feeling about it?
A little nervous, but I think it'll be good fun. I'm glad to finally get the call up.
Right, now, I'm going to ask all of the panellists, because this is a 2-hour show, anyone that's listening that hasn't listened before, introduce yourself, say what course you're on, and, I don't know, anything interesting. If you want to disclose that you're a member of a party or that you voted one way, if you made up your mind for the EU referendum, please do. We'll start with Barnaby.
Hi everyone, I'm Barnaby. I'm a first-year history and politics student. I'm a member of the Labour Party, though possibly not for much longer. I'm voting to remain in the referendum, and I am currently feeling a little bit the worse for wear, so apologies if I seem grumpy.
Yeah, and that's because of the Warwick SU event of Crash, isn't it, Barnaby?
It is indeed.
Bad memories. Matt?
Hello. I am Matt, also first-year history and politics student. That's where I found Barnaby lurking in the back. I am currently contractually obligated by my job not to have any party affiliation, and I've voted to remain in the referendum.
Fair enough. Dan Welsh.
Hi, I'm Dan Welsh. I'm a first-year history student, and I was dragged into this by Henry. So I'm voting to remain.
Thrilled to be here, Dan.
Yeah, I'm same as Barnaby, I think kind of a disaffected Labour supporter, but I'm voting to remain in the EU referendum.
You didn't vote for Labour though, Dan, did you? Just saying.
What, last year or in the Welsh Assembly?
In the Welsh Assembly.
I gave him one of my votes.
Okay, fair enough.
And I gave Lib Dem the other one.
Traitor. Other Dan?
I'm Other Dan.
That's not what he's going to be known as.
Dan 1 and Dan 2.
We got Welsh Dan.
I'm second-year PBE student. I did not vote in the referendum because I can vote. I'm a Malaysian student, so I'm a Commonwealth citizen, have the right to vote. Chose not to because I care very little for British politics.
Oh,
huge.
And James.
Yeah, my name's James. I'm a first-year economist. I don't really have a particular affiliation with any party at the moment. I don't feel any of them particularly engage me, but I'm firmly remain in the EU campaign.
Fair enough. That is a lot of food for thought there. Yeah, great balance here on Perspective. We will try and present the other. Luckily, we're not talking about the EU this week, but just to plug, on Tuesday with our Perspective show, we will be doing an EU special, which I'm sure everyone will be looking forward to. But as well, today, get involved in the conversation. It's a 2-hour show. We'd love to hear what you think. Tweet us at Perspectives Raw or at Raw 12:51 a.m. You can message our Facebook page, which is Perspectives Radio. Click the contact tab if you're listening on the web player, or if email's your thing, email studio@radio.warwick.ac.uk. Now, unfortunately, this show is going to be overshadowed somewhat by the tragic passing of Jo Cox, the Labour MP, but we will be discussing that in great detail. And I think we'll move on to that first, actually. And obviously, if you haven't heard in the news, Jo Cox, it's been all over the news, so we assume you will have heard, but the former Labour MP up in, I think it's Yorkshire, isn't it, Barnaby? Died. She was killed by, I don't want to say the man's name, but she was killed by someone with I think he shot her and then he also stabbed her. And we don't want to talk in too much detail about this because obviously it's horrific. But I want to ask, so this attack, which I think we should class as a terrorist attack, although it hasn't been reported in the media as such really, as it might have been, one could argue if it was another demographic that had committed it. But do we think that the issue of, it was a debate I heard on other news outlets, that this sort of attack on MPs and celebrities in general, do we think this is going to be a real issue? Like, you know, can we see in a few years now, after attacks like this, I appreciate it's the first sitting MP that's died in office, I think, since the 1990s, but MPs have been known to be attacked. Can we see a situation where MPs are going to have to go round with, you know, to be extreme, bulletproof vests, you know, guards? Can we see this happening, Barnaby?
I mean, if this attacks sort of continue, I mean, if it didn't happen in the 1980s when you had sort of the IRA at their peak, not just going to happen now. There obviously is an area of definitely concern about the safety of MPs when they can be stabbed outside the constituency surgeries, sort of when they should be perfectly safe. I don't know whether it's something that we need to solve with kind of aggressive sort of state action, but well, I'd say it's definitely food for thought.
James, do you think, you know, if we're living in a democracy whereby MPs are followed around by bodyguards, that's just not going to be the sort of place we want to live in?
Well, I also think it's bad because it will scare young people away from getting involved in politics.
Yeah.
If you see loads, if suddenly it becomes an issue, and I could well see it becoming an issue, and then are people just going to want to stay away from MPs, and MPs will sort of become less relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a really worrying thing to happen. And also, if it does become a regular thing, then suddenly MPs will just what does it say about our country that people are regularly taking? If people were regularly making attacks on MPs, it wouldn't be good.
It wouldn't be. Matt, do you think that this will take away from, as James said, with young people, but just general constituents, that if you see MPs now hold advice surgeries where you can go and talk to them, if they've got bodyguards in there and whatnot, you know, it's going to take it away and slowly be eroded, and we're going to be living in a presidential system where, because in the US you don't have that sort of link with senators. I mean, they are firmly, regarded as celebrities. What do you think?
I think that there is a certain level to which, if you keep applying further levels of security, that it'll make the MPs less relatable. They're not quite the same as you. You can't meet them easily. And so I think on a direct level, you're less able to engage with your MP. Constituency surgeries, I mean, how will those be possible, really? Because every person coming in is a potential threat. But I think, realistically, some increased level of security perhaps wouldn't be so disastrous. Some level of oversight or police protection. And we already see it for David Cameron, although he's not the same as a normal MP, but I think that it wouldn't necessarily undermine our democracy if there was to be more precautions in place.
What do we think about that, Dan Welsh, about the two Dans sitting next to each other? I don't want to make this confusing. Can you see a situation, whether you think it's desirable or not, can you see a situation whereby we've got MPs walking around with these protections?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that it's been kind of, because, my local MP, his surgery is up the road, and I've always thought that it's been quite weird that somebody who is in a pretty big position of power, is literally just going to sit up there for hours, and you could just theoretically go in there and kill him. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see if you had, perhaps having to go through a metal detector or something to go in there.
Is that something we could see possible? Because you do that obviously in the House of Commons, so why should an MP's surgery be any different?
And, of course, I would think that the MPs themselves, if I was an MP, I wouldn't be looking forward much to my next surgery after this, because, you would be nervous, wouldn't you, really, after something like this? I mean,
quite a lot of MPs did call off their surgeries in light of the attack. Whatever we think of that, I'm not sure. But it does raise the issue that obviously some MPs are worried about themselves and worried about their stuff. Dan, you said that you're not too interested in British politics, but in terms of politics in other countries, international politics, do you think that the MPs do need greater protections?
I mean, I don't think it's so much against our MPs, but just anyone really in the public eye. If you are going to be a celebrity or you are going to be someone who draws some sort of flack, and I think MPs especially draw a lot of flack, then you could have feasibly justified threats against your safety and your life. That's up to you to decide how you want to guard against it. I think you've talked a lot about how, if you have police protection, if you have, bodyguards and, so on and so forth, you distance yourself from the electorate, which is fine. That's a consideration to be made. But if you're making a hard stand on an issue, like you think about people who go against crime or the mafia or whatever, they would need additional protection. And you don't need to have, in your face, big burly men to stop your electorate from talking to you. You just need someone in the background to make sure there's no hidden elements.
So the general consensus here is that we'd be fine if MPs had a bit more security with bodyguards. Anyone have any objections? Barnaby's wavering somewhat. I don't know if James is wavering as well.
Well, I was just going to say, I just wonder what it will do for when MPs are campaigning.
Yeah.
Coming around door to door.
Because they do literally knock on strangers' doors week in, week out. We
regularly get John Redwood knocking on our door.
Really?
Yeah.
Is he a welcome guest at the Crawford household?
Not particularly, no. But yeah, I just wonder what that would do, because, I mean, knocking on someone's door, you're even less safe. I mean, you never know who's going to open that door. So
you don't, and it's always, whatever you think of the MP in question, it's always quite nice to have, even a candidate knocking at your door. He's making the effort to come and talk to you, even if we think their intentions are a little blighted. But we're going to move on now to a quick speech, a couple of compilation of speeches, and the credit to this goes to Sky News, and this is the audio of their little compilation of Jo Cox's speeches in Parliament.
As we know all too well, it is the Assad regime that are primarily responsible for this policy of sustained systematic starvation by the population of Syria.
Mr. Speaker, with people queuing to access food banks in my constituency, does the Prime Minister think it's a priority for the country to bring back fox hunting?
Yeah. I feel the UK hasn't given this crisis the diplomatic priority it demanded. What reassurance can you give me, can you give the House, that a tactical focus on airstrikes won't distract or undermine those vital attempts to achieve a ceasefire and a political transition?
The previous government carried out a detailed assessment of what the European Union has delivered for the people of the United Kingdom, known as the Balance of Competences Review. Yet all has gone quiet, and I wondered whether the Right Honourable Gentleman would let me know when his government will come forward with an overview of all 32 reports to show the British people what the European Union has delivered and help inform the debate.
Jo Cox there, and obviously a lot of the party leaders and fellow MPs have been paying their respects to Jo Cox, and here's what her party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, had to say.
This is a vigil for Jo Cox, who was murdered today in her constituency, doing her job as an MP, representing the area she loved. Tonight, her husband Brendan is devastated, and their 2 children have lost a mum they'll never see again. Lost somebody they can remember as a wonderful woman who stood for many things, above all the principles of human rights, peace and justice, and the love of her community and constituency where she grew up. She was an exemplary MP, a real servant of democracy in every way one could want or imagine. What's happened is beyond appalling. We're here tonight in silent memory of her loss, and we express, obviously, condolences to her family. And the statement that was put out this evening by her husband, Brendan, saying that we had to conquer hatred with love, with solidarity and with support, is one of the most moving statements I've ever heard from somebody so recently bereaved.
Jeremy Corbyn making that statement yesterday. I want to ask now the panel, this particular attack, obviously physically it was an attack on Jo Cox, but do we think it was, realistically, was it a personal attack on her? Was it an attack on democracy? Or was it a very violent and exaggerated sort of perception of the way British politics is sort of shaped at the minute, Barnaby?
I think it's a combination of the toxic discourse of the last sort of 6 or 7 years, starting with the expenses scandal, moving on to any other scandal you can name, Maria Miller, all that stuff, distrust of politicians, the actions of various far-right leaders who I won't name, attempting to stir up hatred against the political class, claiming that they've, that immigration has taken, Britain away from true British people. Well, we've seen what the true British patriots are doing the other day. So yeah, of course it's an attack on democracy. This is essentially a cutting out the middleman of what these people want.
Matt, is this an attack on democracy?
I think it's, if nothing else, an attack on the ideals of democracy. It might not have an effect on democracy, but I think that, as Barnaby says, we're paying the price for a discourse that's permeated, I'd argue, in the last few decades, not just the last few years, of popular fears about immigration, which do exist, being whipped up into a certain frenzy that leads to a person being able to believe that these things are acceptable and the only way of actually carrying out their beliefs outside of the system. So in a way, it is a big threat to democracy, and that people no longer believe that democracy speaks for them.
Dan, not Dan Welsh, other Dan. Sorry, that wasn't who do you think this particular attack was an attack on broadly? Do you think it was an attack on, some people view this as an attack on British politics, as an attack on this particular MP? What do you think?
I think it's tricky to know. I mean, obviously, there's been very little even said about the killer's motives. What I do know of Jo Cox is that she has tackled some pretty serious issues, in her campaign work. So it could be that. It could be, like you said, far right, toxic British politics. I wouldn't say it's an attack on democracy. Because as harsh as this is, I think, to reference the earlier statement made by Henry, I think, if democracy allows for these extreme views and these extreme actions, right? I would say that if you came in and shut that down, that would be an attack on democracy. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily an attack on democracy, but it manifests, the extremes that democracy allows for.
I can't see. I understand your point, but these sort of ideologies, these fascist ideologies, they can't be allowed to sort of see the light of day. I don't think. I mean, I understand the idea that everyone has to have their point of view. But there's a difference between giving something a platform and just sort of airing it to light so it will shrivel up and die like it should. And I just think there's a serious issue of, it's very easy to sit here and have sort of spout the liberal thing of, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but a woman is dead, mother is dead, because we have allowed people like Nigel Farage, people like Paul Golding, people like Britain First, whatever, to have these opinions and have them to enter the mainstream to some extent, and people believe that is an acceptable way to behave, and it's not.
Just to give you some information on the killer, I don't even want to say his name, but he apparently in court, in Westminster Magistrates Court, when asked his name, he said death to traitors, freedom to Britain. Freedom for Britain, which I suppose proves your point, Barnaby. So can I just ask, so this particular, not man, but this is for you, and I don't want to call it an ideological attack, but it is a fascist movement against...
Yeah. I mean, it's not an ideology, because that gives too much credit to the term. But I just can't sort of countenance the fact that we even discuss these kind of ideas. Of course they exist, but they have to be challenged at every single turning. They have to be stamped out. They cannot be allowed to flourish, because we've seen what happens, and we're sort of at the start of a very, very dangerous path in British politics at the moment.
So
and I hope this is no right.
Not inevitable in the extent that it happened. Obviously, you don't know how far it's going to go. But was this sort of...
He got what he wanted. It's definitely a product of what's been happening in the last few years, last few decades.
James, who do you think this is an attack on? This as an overall concept?
Yeah, I really don't know, to be honest with you. I think it's a bit kind of combination of all three. So I mean, clearly this guy is unhappy with Jo Cox, but I think in general, just the effect of it it's an attack on British politics.
Yeah.
I think it's massively it will have huge effects on our political system, how confident we are in it, the feeling of the general public. So I guess that's why I would say it's all three, because it really has affected. It's not just one of them.
Yeah, and Dan, what do you think? Who do you agree with what's been said so far about who this is an attack on?
Yeah, I would agree that it's an attack on democracy, because I think, like, you made a good point about laws and allowing people to have extreme views. But, you also have kind of norms in democracy, which aren't necessarily laws, but they're just kind of things which people follow, which are things like, if you're campaigning, the rhetoric you have to use, if you're going to be responsible, has to be within, like, certain parameters. Yeah. If you're going to go out there and say, if we lose this election, it is literally the end of Britain as you know it, and it's going to be Armageddon, then people are understandably going to get whipped up into a frenzy. And if you're a responsible politician, you have to, understand the consequences your words are going to have, and how some people are going to take them, especially, we don't know about this guy. This guy seems to have some history of mental illness, and I'm not going to use that to try and defend him or something. But, there are a lot of people in Britain who have, issues like that, and if you're going to use this rhetoric, eventually somebody is going to snap.
Right, we're going to move on now to something that's linked, but it's to do with the perhaps after effects in terms of elections. And the Green Party, UKIP, Lib Dems and Conservatives are all announced they're not going to stand against this in the seat of... is Batley and Spen. I sort of had a sneaky feeling this might happen. What do we think, Barnaby? Was this to be expected, or was this, is this a nice gesture from the parties?
I'm actually quite pleased, because there's no precedent for it. I believe the last MP who was killed, his seat was actually contested and lost. Conservative seat went Lib Dem.
Yeah.
But I think it's the sort of the brutality of the attack, the unexpected nature of it, the clear kind of overtones of kind of, far-right nationalism that make it such a scary thing. And I think that's why the parties are trying to show some unity now, sort of against these kinds of ideas.
Do you agree, though? I mean, looking objectively, do you think that they should be standing these parties in a way to sort of because it is democracy?
Yeah.
Is this what the future MP is going to stand there wanted? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's just a very unusual situation, and I don't know. It's not like, if Jo Cox had been involved in a scandal, retired to spend time with her family, that's very different.
Yeah.
And I just think they don't have to. I appreciate that. I think in a sort of very theoretical principle term, they should stand, but they're not going to, and I can very much see the reason why.
Okay, Barnaby, just one thing. Okay. Do you think anyone else will stand in that seat? Do you think you could see a small...
Yes.
Do you think there will be? So, there's other... Britain First haven't announced they won't be standing. Tusk haven't announced they won't be standing.
I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a few fringe parties. Not out of any kind of disrespect, mainly as a way of gaining exposure, I'd imagine. But it won't. Okay. It won't. I think every major party, down to the Greens, have said they won't. So it will be people like Tusk, possibly Britain First, which I'd like because they got something kicked out of them.
Dan, do you agree with the precedent that other parties shouldn't stand in the seat?
I think it is good, yeah. I can see the point about it being an exercise of democracy for the voters, but as Barnaby said, if she had died in a natural way, then she had had a heart attack or something. Because
that did happen with the Labour MP, didn't it? I think it was
Michael Meacher.
Michael Meacher.
Yeah, then I think it does make sense to contest that seat, even if it is a tragic death. But I think in this case, from what we can tell, he seems to have targeted her because she was a Labour MP.
Yeah.
So I think his intentions may have been to get rid of a Labour MP.
So the fact that it's going to stay Labour is perhaps
it's perhaps, and also I think, like I said about the kind of the rhetoric, I think it does kind of cool things down a bit if you're going to say, okay, not every election is life and death. This is bigger than that. We're going to but this is going to be uncontested just to send a message. So I think it does a good job of kind of cooling everything down and kind of restoring a bit of decency.
Matt, have you got any objections to the main parties not standing? Or do you think, again, very respectful?
I think there is no rule book here, as we know, but I think it's difficult because, of course, you want people to have their say, and I think that when there has been an attack of this sort against the ideologies and the policies that Jo Cox has put forward, even though it's by a fringe individual, I think perhaps is there some level that we can see that there is debate about the sort of issues at play, and maybe it would be better for the community if there was a debate and a proper campaign. It's hard to know, but I think the cooling down, at least now, of tensions of electoral campaigning is definitely a positive because it's clear that things have reached a frenzied pitch.
Dan, what do you think about this particular situation where you've got the main parties not standing? Are you not a fan, but are you respectful of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where they're coming from. I'll give a comparison. So back in Malaysia today, we had 2 by-elections, which were a result of a helicopter crash, which killed a minister and an MP. So both seats were vacated, and both seats had 4 cornered fights. In a country where you have a barely 2-party system. So for the last 2 weeks, we've had this huge mudslinging campaign against both parties on the opposition and the government side as a result of someone who died in a helicopter crash. That was just completely tragic. But you've gone straight from this period of mourning for a week, straight to nominations, and for the last 2 weeks campaigning as to, we should win, you should lose, and whatever. And it is quite sad to see. And I think on that note, I can understand why you'd want to hold back and say, look, we'll leave it uncontested. Where I come from, it's very fair game between the government and opposition, so one seat does make a lot of difference, so I can see why they want to go for it. You just had an election last year. There's no real need for it at this point, and I think it's a nice enough gesture. And like you said, it portrays the attack as an attack on the narrative of British politics, a narrative that the politicians themselves do not want to have, regardless of where they come from.
You spoke there about mudslinging, and that is obviously something that has been a factor of British politics at the minute, and in particular the referendum. And without wanting to foreshadow anything, if the circumstances had been different with Jo Cox's death, you would have expected some sort of mudslinging in that campaign to win the seat, because that is the nature of British politics at the minute, unfortunately. James, what do you think about? I'll just give you your say on this idea of all the main parties standing. Is it is it a situation you expected, perhaps?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said. To be honest, I think it's the right thing to do. It would add a real sour note if suddenly we had all the parties coming in mudslinging. So yeah, I think it's a respectful right thing to do in this situation.
Okay, and on the last thing on this particular issue, I'm going to ask now about Owen Jones tweeted yesterday, effectively, that people in this situation were right to talk about it being an ideological, political attack. The murder of Jo Cox, and he tweeted this exact thing. He said, it is not politicising a disgusting murder to understand whether, in part, it was politically motivated. It's just the truth. What do we think about this? Barnaby, you've obviously had pretty strong words on this particular ideology. And this comes from, I don't know how relevant it is, but the Daily Star headline yesterday to say that, not that the Daily Star is well known for its political, coverage or nuanced coverage, but it says, Labour MP dead after attack by Brexit nut. Do we think that this is more mudslinging in a campaign that just doesn't need it, and that Owen Jones is right?
I don't agree with what the Star said. I think it's unfair to associate with things like the EU referendum, but he is right to say that it is a very political attack with political motives by someone with a very particular set of political beliefs, and we can't ignore that because of what it means. You can't just say, oh, it was a lone weirdo kept to himself, like gardening, all the usual stuff that comes out when a white person murders someone based on political motives. If the guy had been of Arab descent, had been Muslim, you can sure as hell bet they'd be talking about political motives, about Islam, about everything. So we have to, because otherwise we let these sort of people win.
Do you agree with that, Matt, about what Barnaby said about saying that it's not disrespectful to talk about ideology in this sense?
No, I think that it's actually the most important thing right now. I know that there are probably many ways that we should slow down a bit, but we should wait for the court process to work, find out exactly what this guy believes and where his ideas come from. But realistically, when attacks like this happen, you have two options. Either you look at the motivations behind them, or you sort of ignore them and cast it off as a strange aberration. I think that the second choice, viewing it as sort of abnormal, is dangerous in that it leads to the same attacks potentially happening again and again. We need to make sure that we attack ideas that cause these sort of violent outbursts at the root and not just look at the individual.
Dan, what do you think about Owen Jones saying that it's not what do you think of Owen Jones in general? You can have your own opinions on Owen Jones, but what do you think about him saying that it's not politicising a murder to say that it's politically motivated?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, last week obviously we had the Orlando shootings, and there was a lot of kind of discussion of this in the American press because you had a lot of people saying, oh, we shouldn't politicise this by talking about gun control. And then, but if it's a political issue that can only be solved by politics, then obviously, you have to politicise it, and the alternative is just kind of not talking about the cause of it until everybody's forgotten about it, and then we just move on and it can happen again. So I think that, I just said, I think that this does have some kind of ties to politics. I think that there are things that we can do which would make attacks like this less likely to occur in the future. So I think that, you do have to politicise it, but there are obviously kind of, you shouldn't try to use it to score points on people or try to twist it, there needs to be kind of a reasoned discussion about it, and there needs to be some kind of consideration of the extent of the tragedy and the sensitivity of it.
James, do you think it's fair to criticise the Star who pointed out in their headline deliberately that the person who killed Jo Cox was Brexit, or do you think it has no real place in, murder's a completely separate thing?
I think there will be a time to kind of start thinking about these things. For me, it's maybe a bit too soon to start coming out with those sorts of headlines. There needs to be. I mean, you've got to think of the family and what they're going to think when they see these headlines. So I think for a time, politics should stay out of these things. But of course, sort of in the next few weeks, that's when you need to work out what this guy's motive was and what he was thinking.
And Dan, do you agree that this is too soon to be talking about the political motives, like James said?
Not necessarily. I think it's too soon to talk about political motives like Brexit and that kind of things when you're kind of linking it tangentially. But if you have a killer who's made statement, before the act, recorded, people know what he said, then, you could build on that. You're not drawing things out of a hat. So I think that's fine. And I think, like what we said earlier, it's a lot of a lot of the narratives that I've been seeing amongst my friends on Facebook and stuff, predominantly Muslim, have been, look, this is a whitewashing of an attack, because if we did this, then it would be completely different. And Jo Cox was a prominent campaigner for Syria and Palestine who had very strong views, supporting, refugees and all these very non-British things. So in a way, I think it's not too soon to talk about that possible political motivations, if we qualify with it being possible.
Okay, and the final few things, I'll just get a general opinion. I won't come to all individually, but the campaign to be suspended, I think, until tomorrow, out of respect, the Leave and Remain campaigns. Mainly yesterday, there was no high-profile campaigning on. Question Time was cancelled. Do we? Is there the general consensus? Do we agree that this is a time to stop politics for a few days and show a bit of respect? Barnaby, yes or no?
I'd say yes.
Matt?
Yeah.
Matt?
Yes.
Two Dans?
Yeah, for a few days at least.
Are we all in agreement? Dan? Yeah, and James is in agreement.
Yes, from me as well.
Okay, and the final thing is, did anyone see this hashtag that was hashtag Thank Your MP? What do we think of this? This is the final thing I said on the matter. Do you think it's in the most horrible way possible? It has allowed for some sort of recognition that MPs get a lot of stick. Let's be honest, and it is an honorary profession. They a lot of them dedicate their lives to standing in elections and for fighting for these particular things. Do we think it's nice in a way that we have to respect our MPs more and we have to thank them more? Matt?
I think it's long overdue. I think that if this attack is the way that it comes about, it's very distressing for British politics. But politicians don't go into it for the money. It's poorly paid compared to other professions which they're eminently qualified for. It's hugely long hours. It's far from home. It's grueling work. It has low job security. And for too long, we've treated politicians as punching bags. If we manage to get to a place where we are more respectful towards our MPs, this has been a great benefit.
James, do you agree that we don't perhaps respect or thank our MPs enough? The nature of British politics, as I was saying earlier, is pretty much personal attacks at the minute, and we've seen things like the MPs' expenses that have exposed the wrong things that they've done. But do we think we don't appreciate them enough?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, clearly MPs are doing some good work. I mean, in my area, I don't particularly know anything that the MPs are doing. They don't really do anything for young people. So it's very hard. I find it hard to really appreciate the MPs in my area. But I mean, definitely. I mean, in this case, Jo Cox was doing great work, and it's good that we've realised. I didn't realise what a great speaker she was, and all the stuff she was doing, and I'd never really come across her at all. So it's a really sad way to have to find out about her. But at least now. We are appreciating her good work, so that's a plus.
Dan, you obviously spoke about Malaysian politics just then. Do the MPs in Malaysia, forgive my ignorance, but do they have, would you say, more respect than what you've seen from British politics, or is it equal?
I'd say no, but I also would say that it's not necessarily unjustified.
Really?
Yeah. Malaysia's only been independent for the last 50 years. Right. I classify it as a very young democracy. That nature of political discourse is very standard, it's not very matured along ideological lines, so they have a lot of MPs who go into it for the wrong reasons, and you can understand why people don't really like it. But do
you agree we should thank our MPs?
I think that's fine. I'll put a scenario this way: if this hashtag came up in Malaysia, you'd have half of them saying, "Oh, my MP's doing great," and the other half of them being, "Oh, I thank my MP for taking away all these contracts or not building me roads." So, it gives light to both sides of the story, I guess.
Dan, do we think this is long overdue, thanking our MPs for what they are doing?
I think it is, yeah, because, Barnaby mentioned the expenses scandal, and I think ever since then, there's been kind of, the expenses scandal was a scandal for a reason. It was, corruption and basically theft of public money. But that doesn't mean that all MPs are corrupt. And there's been a lot of people kind of shocked that they didn't know about Jo Cox because they've been watching her speeches and the work she's done. And I think that just goes to show that even the lesser known MPs, a lot of them are good people. They're not going in it just so they can, pay to have their moat cleaned or something.
Yeah.
They are actually in it for a good reason. So I think it is, they have had, the expenses scandal was bad, but they have kind of had 8 years now of beatings over that. So I think it is overdue.
Barnaby, the issue of MPs' approval ratings, I mean, it's even since as early as the 1960s, 70s, they've been solidly, I mean, it did dip with the expenses scandal a little bit more, but they've been solidly on, only about a 20% approval rating, below that most of the time. And politicians have never really been trusted, particularly MPs have always been notoriously low. Not that this incident's going to change things, but it is nice to have perhaps a few days of thanking your MP, whether you agree with them politically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're very quick to focus on the high-profile scandals, on ministers, on the people who are in the public eye and so their mistakes amplified, and we forget that Parliament has 650 members. It's a deliberative body people have day after day of committee meetings, select committee hearings, actual speeches in Parliament. I mean, you see Theresa May making a statement after a terrorist attack or something. She's in there most days talking about some bill she's trying to put through. She's got her ministers working on it. People who are actually in the government but still to support the party still there listening, making their mind up on how to vote.
Yeah.
It is a much harder job, I think, than people give it credit for. And it is time that we really sort of looked at the true extent of the parliamentary system and the people who serve within it.
Right, thank you for that, Barnaby. We've had a message in from Jack Ebby who says, thank you, MP, is something that is needed for a long time. There's too much vilification of MPs. The vast majority are in it because they believe they can do some good. Get involved like Jack has done by tweeting us at Perspectives Raw or at Raw 12:51am. I've read out the rest, but you can email studio@radio.warwick.ac.uk, click the contact tab on the web player, or message our Facebook page. When we come back, we will be discussing the Tooting by-election, having a quick quiz, touching on whether someone can be effectively too old to go to jail in the case of the Auschwitz former guard who was sentenced at the age of 94 yesterday.
My name's Toby Young, and you're listening to Perspectives.
That's right, and we're going to be talking about something that is more light-hearted now, the Tooting by-election. And if you look at some of the names of the parties, you'll understand what I mean by light-hearted. We had Give Me Back Elmo, I think they were called. We had Monster Raving Loony Party and all the usual people. And there's an independent candidate called Smiley Smiley as well, just to let you know. But on a serious note, this by-election was unfortunately shadowed by the death of Jo Cox, but nonetheless it was held on by Labour, and they increased their majority from 2,842 to 6,357. Barnaby, I know you know quite a bit about the Tooting constituency. You stayed up to listen to the declaration, that dedicated. She clearly increased the Labour majority quite a lot than UMP, who is a junior doctor, incidentally, Rosina Allin-Khan. What do you think about this? Is a remarkable achievement, surely, in that the turnout was only 42.5% as opposed to 70% in 2015.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised as well because I thought it would be actually a decent target for Conservatives. I mean, I think the candidate, it's the same candidate as the general election.
Dan,
who was, I believe, only 6% off Sadiq Khan, who's obviously now Mayor of London. And it's a sort of rapidly gentrifying seat, a lot of sort of wealthy professionals moving in there, building new sort of homes, things like that. I think it might well be a sort of honeymoon phase, the fact that Sadiq Khan hasn't done anything wrong as Mayor of London yet. And so there's a sort of general feeling of like, well, this is the person they want to replace him, may as well give her a chance. So election was only last year, sort of phenomenon. I wouldn't say I think it's unusual because of the circumstance of Jo Cox and whatever.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if the majority was that big in 2020.
Is it a victory for Jeremy Corbyn, Barnaby?
I don't think he really comes into it. I mean, this isn't me trying to do him down. I think this is very much about A, the tragic events of the day, and B, about the sort of start of the first month or so of Sadiq Khan's term as Mayor of London. I don't think party leaders, party politics, the issues of the day really came into it much.
Matt, who is this by-election a victory for, do you think? And do you think it's something that was inevitable that Labour were going to hang on, or what do you think?
I think on a certain level it has always been a Labour seat, so in a way, ever since it was created in the 1970s, I think it's been a Labour seat, and so it's inevitable that Labour was to hang on. But I think we should give Labour's newest MP, what's her name again? Allin-Khan, a lot of credit actually, because being able to increase the majority quite substantially in a by-election where often not many people turn out. Particularly, I don't think Labour supporters typically turn out so much in by-elections. I think that she deserves a lot of credit for her success.
Dan Welsh, do you agree that this victory is her success really, and in many ways building upon what Sadiq Khan did? Yeah, and also, is it nice to have a junior doctor in Parliament, someone to fight Jeremy Hunt?
It is. I think it is fitting that she got elected in the kind of situation that's going on with junior doctors. I think that I would agree that I don't think it's a big triumph for Corbyn. One of the from what we've seen so far from Labour's electoral record since he got in, the pattern seems to be kind of Labour not really going back too far, but not making any gains needed. They seem to be stuck in the opinion polls about 5 points behind the Conservative, and Tooting I think is about, I'm not sure, it would be probably about the seat that they would win if they were about 5 points behind the Conservative. So I mean, it's obviously good that they won it, but not necessarily a sign that it's really touching a nerve, Corbyn at least.
Fair enough. James and Dan, do we think that this particular election result is something that can really be considered as Jeremy Corbyn doing well as Labour leader, he's increasing majorities?
I mean, I don't really know much about the constituency, but I would say, I mean, if it's a safe Labour seat, I think it's very difficult, or it's safe-ish Labour seat. I think it's very difficult to draw major conclusions from it. I'm just happy to see the junior doctors.
More junior doctors in Parliament.
Yeah, that'll be good.
That could be an interesting debate with more of them in Parliament debating Jeremy Hunt. Dan, in this particular situation, I know you say that you don't know too much about British politics, but do you think that you obviously heard all the rubbish that's been going on about Jeremy Corbyn? He's been getting a lot of stick in the media. Do you think he deserves a bit of credit for this by-election win?
No, I wouldn't say so. No. I think it's too small an election. Like, I think there are other things that Corbyn could, pull his weight on.
Right. Okay. And just the final thing on this by-election, Labour got 56%, Conservatives got 36%, but the other parties that are in there, the Greens only got 2.6%, Lib Dems on 2.6%, UKIP on 1.6%, and Christian People's Alliance on 0.5%. Does this sort of show that? Do you think this is sort of? I mean, in a by-election, Barnaby, what we've normally seen is small. I mean, the Lib Dems are traditionally the by-election kings. They used to do very well in by-elections. UKIP have been doing very well up north and obviously gaining where there's been defections. Is it weird that we're still seeing this sort of two-party trend in by-elections and that Green and Lib Dem vote both went down?
I think this particular seat being sort of not exactly a marginal, but the main contest being between the Conservatives and Labour mean that other parties don't do so well when it's in a sort of zero-sum game. People who might vote Green might vote Labour to keep the Tories out if they see that as being a risk. I think in seats where there's, say, like South Thanet, that was like a three-way fight, more or less. Yeah. Or in seats like, say, Eastbourne, something like that, which were sort of former Lib Dem seats that went Tory, you might see more of a sort of Lib Dem come back again, because then the chance that they're more likely to unseat the Conservatives. I think there's a large element of sort of tactical voting, particularly in by-elections, where it's seen as that there only being two possible winners.
Matt, do you agree with Barnaby on this, that it's the particular seat rather than the way British politics go? We're not seeing an entrenchment of the two-party system further.
Yeah, I think the seat itself is very different to, I suppose, the standard seat that you'd see, in that, I mean, it's pretty exceptional for a mayor to have vacated a seat, and now there's a constituency going up for grabs. I think that in many ways this is a pretty strange occurrence. I don't think it's going to be repeated, but I think Sadiq Khan's mayoralty has a big role to play.
Right, we're going to move on now to the Auschwitz question, but before that, just the last thing on this particular issue, do we want to see more candidates? The Monster Raving Loony Party got a big cheer when they got there. I think they got 54 votes. Was that, Barnaby, you were listening to the count? Sorry to keep going back to you, but I know you were listening. Do we think this was not a nice moment, but it was a bit of a light relief, wasn't it, from British politics, that parties like the Monster Raving Loony Party can stand, and seemingly people can vote for them and do.
Well, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? It takes all sorts. As long as you're not trying to incite violence or hurt anyone. It doesn't matter if you want to stand in an election on weird platform. Go for it. It's one of the sort of British eccentricities that I actually don't mind so much.
But you wouldn't consider voting for Monster Raving Loony Party or Give Me Back Elmo Party?
It depends who was running in the election. If some kind of hardcore Corbynista is selected to fight my safe Tory seat I live in, then I might consider it.
Right, now we're going to move on now to a serious issue, another serious issue on the show. This is the former Auschwitz guard Reinhold Hanning. I don't know if I've said that completely right, but he was convicted yesterday at the age of 94. Obviously, I don't expect any of you to know a particular, a lot about this particular man or about the case. But what do we think about? It's difficult, but there always seems to be something a little bit sad, not sad in a way, because obviously he was part of the Nazi room, but he's 94 years old. Not sympathy, you know what I'm trying to get at, but James, do we feel that it's perhaps, is it going to help that he's going to prison, or is does it help because it's part of the wider, we're trying to stamp out exactly what happened in the Holocaust?
When I saw this news story, I really wasn't sure how I felt about it, because I mean, he's clearly done terrible things in the past, but I don't know him specifically, but I imagine he's lived with that his whole life, and I bet I imagine he's fairly sorry I hope he's sorry about it. It just seems unfair. Now he's not I don't know, and I see it's difficult. It's really difficult because it's not. He's done terrible things, and he should be.
It's taken this long, hasn't it?
Yeah,
for him to
exactly.
Get there.
it just seems, I don't know, if at 94 to convict him for 5 years. I don't know. It just doesn't seem. I don't know if it's right for me. I don't personally agree with it.
Okay, Dan, do we think there's ever like a maximum age that we should sort of not leave it, but are we feeling slightly uncomfortable with the fact that a 94-year-old will be going to prison for things that happened, in the past?
I'm hesitant to say that it's dependent on the age, but I think it has been a long time that has lapsed.
Right.
Since that's happened. This is not a case of someone who's been on the run for 90-odd years, trying to evade his... he's come out and said, yes, I was an accessory to it. I knew what was going on. I did not stop it. I don't think he was directly involved in any of the killings. He was just a guard. So I think that's that whole element of whether, it's right to prosecute him as well. So I think the sadness comes from the fact that he has lived this long life, having to deal with the fact that he has seen and done these things.
Right, okay. That's interesting. So, but you're not objecting to the fact that he should, whatever age he is, he has done bad things. He didn't stop what was happening, therefore he has to pay the price.
I think if that's the law, then that's how the law works, really.
Okay, Dan Welsh, do we agree with Dan?
Well, kind of the two purposes of the justice system and punishment is to deter people from doing crimes like this and to kind of recuperate the person who did it. And in this case, neither of those really apply because nobody's going to be deterred from committing a similar crime, and this guy's not going to commit another crime like this again. So I think the only other thing is that this is kind of like retribution for it. And I think it's kind of dangerous to bring that into a justice system because it can lead you down some pretty dark roads if you start bringing it in just to inflict pain on people. So I don't really think there's much gain. I understand why he's going to jail because obviously what he did, 70 odd years ago was terrible. But I'm not sure that there's too much gained from it.
Okay, Matt, what do we think about what Dan's just said then? Does Dan have a point, or do you agree with other Dan and James? I've got to stop using that other Dan, non-Welsh Dan.
No, I agree with what's just been said. I think that we have to ask, is putting a 94-year-old man into prison justice? Is that really going to help anyone? Is that really what we want to see from a country? I think that there should be some sort of punishment. Clearly no one's saying, off you go, oh, you scamp you. People are saying there should be some sort of justice there. There should be something we should do to him. But prison doesn't really help anyone. It's not particularly just. And perhaps in a way, it would be a sign for Germany to say, actually, we're bigger than our past. We're saying that we don't need to inflict pain and punishment onto a 94-year-old man to show that we've moved beyond this. It'd be a noble step for them to do something else other than put him in prison.
Barnaby, there were other people at the trial who were the same age and were people who were affected by the acts of the Holocaust, and there were people interviewed afterwards who said they were pleased that this had happened and that despite his age he has to live with this and it's the right thing to do. Do you agree with Matt about the sort of not great principle putting a 94-year-old man in prison?
I think obviously we have to accept that what he did was horrific and it seriously has affected people's lives, and I can understand that they would want to see some retribution, but of course the point of the justice system is that it's the law as opposed to people taking sort of revenge in their own way. And while I think it's bad to say, oh, he knew what was happening and did nothing to stop it. Obviously, yeah, that's terrible, and and everything like that. But I don't think we should ascribe extra guilt to a man for not being a lone hero in a sort of horrific system of murder, sort of systematic murder. He wasn't the brains of the operation. He was a guard. He obviously probably did believe in the ideology. He obviously did help to carry it out. But he's not the originator of it. He was just a sort of cog in the machine. And while, of course, he should be sort of sanctioned for what he did, maybe put under house arrest, I don't know, I think that the element of kind of vengeance is a little bit concerning considering what the justice system is supposed to be doing.
Okay, right, I'm going to go to an unofficial vote again on this because everyone seems to be quite torn. And everyone seems to be undecided as well, undecided and torn, and there's a weird dichotomy here. Do we think that he should, if you had to make a decision, do we think that he should have to go to jail for what he's done, weighed in against what he's done, against the context, Barnaby?
No.
No. Matt?
No.
Dan?
No.
No. Other Dan?
I'll lean on no.
You lean on no. And James?
I was going to say no, but just for balance, I'll say yes.
You say yes. This seems to be the same ideology, consistent throughout today. Right, okay, now we're going to move on later to the Perspectives quiz and an interview with GYLES BRANDRETH that I caught up with him when he was at the Warwick Arts Centre recently, the former MP and comedian.
Hello. You're listening to Raw 1251 AM. This is Bizzle Brash. Boom, boom.
Very scary sight in the studio there where Barnaby Merrill was miming exactly what was going to be said there. Pretty weird. Oh, we've had a message in, actually, from Dan, who says, interested to see whether people think countries should be banned for football hooligans. Oh, yes, this brings on to a next topic of conversation, and as to whether football hooligans should be, what the reparation should be for these hooligans, which has been a massive problem at the Euros. Barnaby, you've been watching, I've seen you watching a lot of the games at the Euros. Causing a lot of trouble in Bar Fusion.
Oh, yeah.
And whatnot, you hooligan.
Windmilling around, taking crash to the streets.
Yeah, but on a serious issue, these hooligans, there's been a lot of problems, and at first it was involving England, but, without trying to attribute it to one country, it does seem to be very heavily focused on Russia and their fans. They were temporarily suspended, I think.
Probationary disqualification. If they do it again, they're out.
What do we think of that?
I think in this circumstance, it's quite a drastic step. But because of the sort of nature of, I think, the difference between the Russian sort of hooligans and some of the ones around, I mean, there's always going to be drunken idiots who do stupid football tournaments. And I think it's quite unfair to expect a sort of national team, a national FA, to be able to exercise much control other than sort of like, guys, can you not? Whereas you had the Russian sports minister basically tweeting like, "Nice work, lads," like, show them how it's done.
Yeah.
You had people like flying in, especially for like 48 hours, to beat up England fans. Yeah. And to be honest, the Russian FA hasn't done a huge amount. So I think in this case, considering they're hosting the World Cup in 2 years' time as well, it's necessary as a sort of very stern reminder of your responsibilities if you want to be a sort of respected member of the sort of international footballing community.
Dan, you were saying that you'd seen pictures of one of the... There seems to be a link between the Crimea conflict and the hooligans involved that you were telling me about.
It's all very weird because the guy who's like the head of the Russian supporters association is an actual Nazi and is also a very close friend of Putin. And it appears that some of these hooligans were also the volunteers.
There's pictures, isn't there?
There's pictures of him. I was like, if you Google his name, the first picture is him standing next to Putin, and the second one is him giving a Nazi salute in front of a Nazi flag.
Charming.
So, and it seems like these are the same people who invaded Ukraine, were Putin's volunteers. Who invaded Ukraine in 2014?
Did not know this.
And now they seem to be.
It's quite odd, isn't it? So we don't.
It's very, very weird.
They're not there for the football, are they?
It literally could only happen in Russia.
It's a really odd situation. Barnaby and Matt didn't know this. They're looking utterly bemused.
I don't blame you for the look on your face
by the situation. James, do we think that you're a big football fan?
I am, yeah.
Unfortunately, you're a Reading fan.
Yeah, not much going for.
Don't know how many hooligans there are at that game, but perhaps when you play Millwall, there might be a couple.
Yeah, well, they have got a nickname actually in Reading. They're called Hula Hoops.
Really?
Yeah, there was quite a damning article about them a few years ago, and it caused a real stir.
I hope that didn't involve you and Jacob.
No, Jacob and I stay well away from the hula hoops.
Good. Right, so on this particular, do you think this is an issue that is escalating in football hooliganism?
Yeah, it really is.
Because people don't seem to be interested in the football. It's just about
going and beating people up. Yeah,
it's an excuse, isn't it?
I worry about, because I hear stories from my dad about what it was like when he was a boy, going to football games and the hooliganism involved then. And it would just spoil the game. I mean, already the games, there's problems with the game and the money involved. If you start adding fan hooliganism as well, then suddenly there's not much going for football at all. And I don't know, because that's one of the things I've always said about football. I just think it's got the best atmosphere of any sports fixture you go to, just chanting, all that kind of thing. But yeah, there's just people who ruin it, and they just go along for the wrong reasons, and they're just not interested in football, and it spoils the game.
Is it just a separate thing now? Do you think? Do you think it's literally things like festivals, things like football matches are now just excuses for people who want to go and cause trouble?
Definitely, people who are flying out to France just to get drunk and cause trouble, and it's just not what it's about. I don't know how you deal with it, to be honest. I think it's very difficult. I'm quite scared that England will get disqualified if fans just continue to be stupid. I think it's been poorly organised in some ways. I mean, the fact that Russia were playing in Lille on Wednesday, and then England, that's where the England fan zone is. So after what happened when England played Russia, the fact that then all the England fans were going to the fan zone the night before, then there was always going to be trouble.
Right.
So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to manage and how you deal with it, because it's not the country's problem. I mean, it's neither the Russian or the England team that are encouraging these things, although we're learning more about the Russian team than what's going on there. But so it seems unfair to punish them, but you've got to do something.
Okay, Dan, do you think it's wrong to punish a nation for how their fans behave? I mean, if this does continue and it is England fans or Russian fans or whatever, should the team be penalised?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, there's only so much the team can actually do over its fans. What I could say is that I think there should be an expectation of the team, of the country, to take the first step and do something about them. So an external body can't sanction Russia or England or whatever to do anything about their fans. But if you think about what China does with its belligerent tourists around the world, they pull their passports. So Russia turns around and says, look, if you guys are going to go over there and make a mess of things, stop traveling.
Yeah, England was mentioned there, and I've just seen a tweet now that apparently it's confirmed that there are more England fans in hospital than have been charged with hooliganism, which is obviously a pretty damning report on this football hooliganism and in particular England. Dan Welsh, do you think that... I mean, obviously, there's an argument as to whether countries can be doing more to prevent or to dispel their fans from thinking violence is okay. But should they be deliberately in trouble for that? Is it their responsibility directly?
I think there is. I'm not sure if any of you saw, but there was at the Croatia-Czech Republic match yesterday, there was some disorder there because the Croatian fans started throwing flares on the pitch, and I think they actually injured one of the stewards who... when it blew up in front of him. And in that case, the news that was coming out of it was that these were kind of fans who disliked the country's FA and were deliberately trying to get the team disqualified to try and get the FA to resign. Mm-hmm. And in that case, the FA, I think, has taken action against them and is trying to stamp it out and is doing all it can. And in that case, clearly they are taking a responsibility. But in the case of Russia, as we mentioned, leading Russian politicians seem to be kind of reveling in this violence. So it doesn't seem that they're at all serious about actually tackling this problem. Mm-hmm. So in that case, obviously they do have to be.
Barnaby, do you agree with Dan that it's what he's saying there?
More widely about hooliganism, I think that's sort of a socio-economic point in that because football's so sort of like marketised now and so sort of footballers feel very far away from the fans, things like that. Some people, wrongly obviously, feel like they can sort of get back the old atmosphere by basically getting tanked up and fighting each other. If you go to the Emirates Stadium, I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm afraid to say. Probably my show with Henry. It's very sort of sanitised. There's like searches on the way in, but then you always get a few guys who've had a few beers and they just sit there, normally just slagging off the players, normally the foreign ones, and they're not actually there for the football. They're just there for a bit of noise because they obviously don't fit. Obviously, that's how it used to be on the terraces in the 70s, obviously, and people feel like they miss it, I guess.
Okay, Matt, do you think that Russia, if it keeps coming that it's their fans involved in all these incidents, should they be disqualified?
It's a harsh step, and I'm very sorry to see that the Euro 2016 hooligan tournament's been beset by football. But I think that if there is... It's tough because I understand that there are obviously Russian fans who aren't engaging in this violence. I imagine that the majority of Russian fans who are watching the football don't support this violence at all, and it would be very disappointing for them if their national football team was kicked out of the tournament for the actions of a few. But equally, I think it would serve as quite a big reminder to the Russians committing the acts of violence that we're seeing that this isn't okay, and if you do this again, you will lose out. And so I think that it might be a necessary punishment in the long run.
James, Russia are meant to be hosting the next World Cup.
Yeah.
Is that now something that has to be seriously looked into as to whether that's possible or even advisable?
Yeah, definitely. But I think we've seen how well World Cups are dealt with and who runs them, so I don't know if that will actually happen. I think... Yeah, I'm from an England point of view. How many fans are going to want to go? It's a problem because the fans who are interested in the football, we'll see Russia hosting a World Cup and they'll be scared to go out, which will mean the only people that will go out will be people that want to fight, and you suddenly have a problem there. So I think, I wouldn't. I know I definitely wouldn't want to go to a World Cup in Russia personally, and I think there'll be.
And people shouldn't have to have that threat.
No,
really, should
exactly. It's the World Cup's not about politics or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or, you should feel safe there, and it's just that you go to watch football, watch the best teams in the world. But I don't think it will be like that in Russia.
Dan, I don't know how much of a big football fan you are, but do you think fans should have to go to a World Cup and genuinely feel in fear of their lives, or in fear of being beaten up because of football violence in a country?
Probably not.
No.
I mean,
it's a pretty easy question, that.
Well, I mean, if you like the violence and you think it's part of the atmosphere, then maybe, but probably not for everyone.
No. Not for your average family. It's not a family trip, is it? But so Dan, do you think, is this something that it's really difficult, but do we think, honestly, this is evidence enough? There were concerns about Russia hosting the World Cup in the first place. Is this more evidence? Is it time, genuinely, for whatever we think FIFA will do, is it actually time to say they can't host it? This cannot happen where there's this sort of football violence.
I think you're going to have to put serious thought into that, because, if you remember before the last Euros, there were serious concerns about the Polish and the Ukrainian issues they have with hooligans, but that was a case where it seemed like the FA there were determined to stamp it out. I was just looking at I was trying to find that article about them invading Ukraine, and the head of the Russian FBI said something like, it's no surprise that the English were beaten up because they're used to seeing men, in quotes, at their gay pride parades. So it appears there that, the Russian, up to in the high levels of the Russian government have, no kind of intention of stopping this. And it makes you wonder, this is against England as well. What's going to happen if you have, if Ukraine or Turkey qualify for the World Cup in Russia and you have them having to travel? I don't really see any situation in which they're not going to have violence, serious violence, against those fans in those countries. So I think, you're going to have to say to the Russian fans, you're going to have to actually change your attitude to this, start clamping down on this, or, you can't hold an event like this.
To take the World Cup away from them?
Because
you think?
We all know that the World Cup is going to be used by Russia as a kind of big propaganda event, like the Sochi Winter Olympics were, as a big kind of look at how free and wonderful Russia is. And it's a big thing for Putin, and having it taken away from them would be send a message that you can't use football hooligans. You can't tolerate them if they're beating up your political opponents, from other countries.
Right, Matt, do you feel comfortable with taking the World Cup away from Russia?
It's a very drastic step, and it's clear that it can't be taken lightly. But when there's this particular bizarre nexus between the football hooligans and the political institutions within Russia, it seems that some sort of step towards that is necessary. It's bizarre, it's strange, I think it's unprecedented on some level for it to be taken away. But I think the very weird circumstance of Russian ministers almost backing up the violence, it needs to be done.
And Barnaby, finally.
Yeah, look, if the new FIFA leadership is serious about reform, they need to stamp out the corrupt decisions taken by the Blatter, Platini axis. And these last two World Cups are massive, clear examples of this kind of corruption, giving sort of semi-totalitarian, authoritarian states with very questionable human rights records World Cups never works out well. We've just seen exactly why you shouldn't do it.
That a slight intonation of the cranium is as adequate as the spasmodic movement of one optic to an equine quadruped utterly devoid of any visionary capacity. My name's Jo Brandreth, and you're listening to Raw.
Welcome back to Perspectives. Now it's time for our infamous quiz that I know Barnaby looks really excited for. It's the only reason he got up in the morning after Crash for this particular
6 hours sleep, I'm
event.
pumped.
That's not too bad. It could have been worse.
I need a lot of sleep, Henry.
Okay, fair enough. Right, the teams this week are Matt and Barnaby versus Dan, and James.
Sorry, Dan. I hope I let you down.
You proved the pattern. Yeah.
I don't know what to call you. There hasn't been any relevant political news that we can really use in the quiz, but I could call you perhaps the. You could still be Gordon Brown if you want. You could be Gordon Brown. And you could just be any other a credible politician.
This is a terrible question.
Yeah, a credible politician.
But right, so the first question is, what have MPs... What have MPs asked for? This is in relation to Jo Cox, but it's not a serious question. What have MPs asked for when they get recalled to Parliament on Monday, specifically about where they want to sit?
Gordon Brown. They've asked to sit without party affiliation and with each other, like across the.
They have indeed. I'll give you a quick correct.
Oh, I wasn't ready for that. I didn't realise it was going to be that quick fire. Come on, I need to get zoned in.
Come on.
Yeah.
What is going on? Right. Question number 2. Name of the Conservative candidate. They get easy, don't they?
Okay, oh my goodness, I'm panicking.
Name of the Conservative candidates who fought Tooting in 2015 and 2016. Anyone?
Oh.
Danielson?
Sorry.
It is Dan.
Dan.
Begin with B, like Brown.
Right. Dan Brandreth.
Dan Brown.
I'm going to give you
Dan Brown.
Right, none of you have got that.
Yeah, sorry. No.
You're both wrong. It is Dan Watkins who was the candidate. Right, next question. What did Donald Trump call Belgium?
Oh, a great city. Gordon Brown.
City,
He called them a city when they are indeed a country, Barnaby. Correct answer. Next question. This is a bit of an obscure one. What did Tory MP Philip Davis say David Cameron was thinking when he's considering taking more refugees? Did he say he has a weird idea about it? Did he say he has an emotional craving for refugees? Or did he say he's just bonkers?
He's just bonkers.
Just bonkers. Unfortunately not.
Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown.
Isn't it a weird idea?
Weird idea. Unfortunately, wrong. I won't give that to
emotional
you.
craving.
He had an emotional
Sorry, Dan,
craving, apparently, for refugees.
Right.
Next, which EU campaign has been criticised for sending allegedly illegal, because of the number they're sending, spam texts to people, to potential supporters?
Gordon Brown.
Do you have to say the name of our team?
I thought you had to say the name of your team.
Yeah, well, you can just shout.
Our
Just
team
shout.
name's a bit longer though. I don't know if it's fair.
Just shout your name then. Just shout whatever you want. Right. Anyone got an answer to that question? Which EU campaign has been criticised for sending illegal spam texts?
Leave campaign.
Leave campaign. I need the specific organisation.
Oh, okay.
Leave.eu.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barnaby, but he nicked there right in front of you. Leave.eu.
Leave.eu are like the less credible one.
I'll let you have that. Yeah.
Well, they're the ones who tweeted about the free movement of Kalashnikovs, aren't they?
Yeah.
Orlando terrorist attack. Which band this is not actually a strictly political question, but which band were the fans attacked for drinking during Ramadan in their gig in Turkey? Which band? Dan?
It's Radiohead.
Radiohead is correct. Their fans were allegedly attacked because they were drinking, and the people in Turkey thought it was too ostentatious during Ramadan. And the next question, what has Sadiq Khan said about the controversial water cannons that were happening with Boris Johnson? Has he said he will use them, he will throw them, he will sell them, or he'll keep them if he needs them?
Keep him if he needs them.
Keep him if he needs them.
Oh, not again. I'm terrible on these multiple choice
Sell
ones.
them, isn't it?
Sell them. Wrong again. He said he will use them. Even though apparently Theresa May said they are illegal, but he will use them anyway.
That's not to
water his plants, perhaps.
Yeah. Not the only thing Theresa May said is illegal as well, let's be honest. Which bizarre incident with Remain and Leave happened on the River Thames, and who was involved?
Flotilla of boats between Bob Geldof and Nigel Farage over fishing regulations.
Right,
Brilliant
one
story.
for that, one for Bob Geldof, if it happens quickly, and another one for Nigel Farage.
Who looked like wearing like Alan Partridge in that particular.
Yes,
I don't know if you've seen the side-by-side comparison photo.
And he was like standing in front of a sign that said like caution slippery.
Yes.
Knowing me, knowing EU.
Oh, brilliant.
And,
we have a point for that.
And the final question, what did the BHS owner, Sir Philip Green, say to an MP?
Gordon Brown. Don't look at me like that, it's weird.
Yeah, did anyone see this? He was apparently the MP was looking at him in a, do you know what, actually? I'll show you exactly what was said.
Could you, sir, do you mind not looking at me like that all the time? It's really disturbing. Sorry? No, you just want to stare at me. It's just uncomfortable, that's all.
I wasn't quite just staring at you, but I don't wish to make you uncomfortable.
Sorry?
I don't wish to make you
uncomfortable. No, but I'm just saying.
Fellow.
This is somebody else, but it's just uncomfortable sort of staring at me.
Everyone is laughing in the studio.
I think the pensioners who didn't get their pensions feel quite uncomfortable too. So,
So that brings to a close the Perspectives quiz and indeed the panel for today. So thank you very much for coming on, everyone. Thank you to Barnaby, Merrill, thank you to Matt Allen, thank you to James, to the two other Dans.
Thanks, Henry.
That's a joke. But thank you to everyone for coming on. It's been great. It's been great having you all on. It's been great having you, James, for your first one.
Yeah, it's good
great
fun.
having you back, the two Dans, and these blooming regulars. Oh, it's your second time now, Matt, isn't it?
Come on.
So, yeah, you know. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming on. Now we're going to play the Gyles Brandreth interview. But just let you know, coming up on Raw in the next few weeks, we have EU referendum coverage, left, right, and centre. There's going to be interviews uploaded to our YouTube on Eddie Izzard. There is one on there from Dave Nellis. There's going to be Baroness Susan Kramer. David Curtin is the new UKIP Assembly member. And just before we go to the Gyles Brandreth interview, I just want to play you a little clip of his hilarious rant on Have I Got News for You.
It's about the European Union referendum. Nobody knows which way it is going to go, and nobody knows quite which way it should go. All we do know is that it will mean the end of the world.
You're inviting Armageddon, then?
We are inviting, if we vote exit, apparently, everything will collapse.
Yeah.
Already, Barbara Windsor has committed suicide on EastEnders in anticipation of Brexit. Our houses will be worthless. There will be a third world war. It's going to be appalling, so totally appalling. But, of course, if we stay in, we will then be overwhelmed by 200 million people a week arriving on our shores. Most of them apparently from Turkey, but not delightful.
Yep. I'm amazed you're not the spokesman for both sides.
I feel in a way that I am. I'm ready to be. Because the truth is, I know that we don't know. Because I have been there before.
Well, you've been a Tory MP?
Yes.
And you know they know nothing.
Can I say... The truth is... My name's Gyles Brandreth, and this is Perspectives.
Right, so you can listen to that on YouTube, the whole clip of Gyles Brandreth. I just thought it was a bit of a funny stance on the EU referendum, but now is the interview, and just let you know, Gyles' tour is still going on. It is called Word Power, and he's here, there, and everywhere. He's non-stop with this tour, but I caught up with him when he was at the Warwick Arts Centre, and we were in his dressing room, and it was a surreal experience. I met his wife, and just to thank Gyles, because he gave me a free ticket to his show, which I was going to buy a ticket for anyway, which was brilliant, and also gave me a signed copy of his book, which is brilliant. So here we go. I'm joined here now by former MP and comedian Gyles Brandreth, who is performing at the Warwick Arts Centre tonight. Gyles, how are you?
Well, I'm well. I love your way of saying you're joined. Actually, you're joining me, because this is my dressing room.
Yes, I am, actually.
And the whole place is amazing here. I came into the Warwick Arts Centre, haven't been for a few years, and it's sort of suddenly turned into sort of, I don't know, Gatwick Airport. It's deluxe, it's huge, it's amazing.
It's very impressive.
And backstage, can I tell you, some of the theatres I have been to, well, they haven't changed a lot since the Victorian heyday of touring theatres. Whereas this is bright and breezy, it's clean, it's cheerful. It is a credit to Warwick University.
Thank you very much. We'll start now on the tour. It's called Word Power, and obviously you've got a long history of words. I know you're the honorary president of the Association of British Scrabble Players, I'm told. Tell us about the tour. How's it been so far? It's been on for a couple of months now.
It's been on for a couple of decades, it seems. It's a curious life, this touring. In fact, it's 45 dates around the United Kingdom, and it always has the same experience. When I arrive wherever I'm going, I wonder where I am, why I'm still doing it. And then by the interval, I think, oh, it's not too bad. And then by the end of the show, I think, oh, this is fantastic. Oh, this is great. And then I have the horror of going out into the streets and trying to find somewhere to eat. The real challenge of touring is there aren't places to eat. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this off and on now for more than 40 years. And when I began doing this sort of thing, when you came out of a theatre at 10:30, 11 at night, you went to the local Chinese restaurant. Well, Chinese restaurants don't exist in the same way. For good reasons, because Chinese people, maybe don't want to run restaurants, but they don't want to run restaurants because they're running accountancy firms and solicitors firms, and they're doing other things. The families are not carrying on the tradition of Chinese restaurants. So if you're lucky, you will find a delicious Bangladeshi restaurant, but even those are not as many as there used to be. So it's quite a challenge. So often my wife and I retreat to the Premier Inn in the hope of bumping into Lenny Henry, but he doesn't. We've seen the advertisements. We have never seen him, actually, to be honest. We are at Premier Inns all the time. We're looking under the pillows, under the beds. No sign of Sir Lenny, but we sneak in our M&S or Waitrose food, and we sit on the edge of the balsa wood bed, and we tuck into a late-night feast. So that's the touring life. It's fascinating because it's live theatre, and that is what is intriguing about it. And the show is a celebration of words and language. It's called Word Power because words are what define us. I love language. English is the richest language in the world. I mean, literally 500,000 words in the Oxford English Dictionary. French equivalent is about 100,000 words, and that includes le weekend. So we have this wonderfully rich language, and it's worth celebrating because language is power. Language is what defines us, differentiates us from the animals and those whose hands do trade upon the ground. As Bertrand Russell, the great philosopher, once said, no matter how eloquently a dog may bark, he cannot tell you that his parents were poor but honest. Only words can do that. So it's a show all about words. And to go with the show, there is a book called Word Play. And after the show, we set up our stall. This is the reality of show business. We set up our stall outside, and we flog the merch. It's called the merch. And my wife collects the money. And why do we do this? Because we need the money. As I explained to people, we've both discovered over the years that money is in fact the one thing keeping us in touch with our children. So we still have to bring in some money, and we try to keep hold of it because nobody told us about Panama. So
we didn't get the memo.
We didn't get the memo when that one was going around. We missed out on that. So we're still earning our keep. So we sell the merch, and the book is the book of the show. It's called Wordplay, and it's a celebration of words and language, and it's got some of the meatier stuff in it. You know, for example, in the show, there's I don't have a support band. Some acts go on, they just do 50 minutes, you know, or an hour, because this show began in Edinburgh as an hour, but it has to be a full evening, so it's a 2-hour show. Some of the acts bring on support acts. I don't know if but that may be whoever was here as the matinee. It could be the stripper. I don't know. Anyway, it's somebody singing in the background, backstage life. So we sell the merch, we sell the book, but the book does more substantial stuff than the show can do. For example, in the show we talk about politicians and their use of language. And of course, Barack Obama could be credited with having become president because of his eloquence. Oh, here's somebody coming in. This is Martin, who is the excellent sound guy here at the Warwick Arts Centre. And Martin has just put the batteries into the mic, and they seem to be working. He's getting credit. Hey, he's waving at his... He's famous now. Anyway, so, for example, I talk about Barack Obama and how his eloquence 8 years ago during the presidential campaigns made him stand out from the crowd, and how words do define politicians. Certainly, I don't think I'd remember his predecessor, the 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush, had it not been for his amazing way with words. He's the fellow who said, you know, the trouble with the French is they don't have a word for entrepreneur. In the book, I'm able to give you a whole collection of Bushisms. Obviously, in the show, it's a 2-hour show. It's a roller coaster. We hope it's a magic carpet ride around the world of words. They can't be the substance there is in the book.
Right. And now on the subject of words, you obviously spent a lot of time in the House of Commons, where there's a lot of words. I know Jacob Rees-Mogg famously uses interesting words there. I was just wondering, what profession would you say you preferred, comedy or politics, or are they quite similar?
Well, there is among certain politicians a kind of theatrical bent. And I think, I must say, Jacob Rees-Mogg could tour the halls. He's a most extraordinary character, and he looks as if he's appearing in a costume all the time. Actually, that's the way he naturally... I mean, he's bright and he's amusing, and I find him very likeable. But he does look like a character from a sort of Jeeves and Wooster sitcom, doesn't he? So, I don't know what to say. I do believe in the value of words. One of the things that saddened me a little bit about the House of Commons is that the chamber of the House of Commons is no longer the fulcrum of debate. You see Prime Minister's questions, and it's a sort of set-piece ding-dong. The chamber is full then, but I don't know that the exchanges reveal very much. At other times, the chamber is often virtually empty. And I think when I arrived at Westminster, I had hopes that it would be the fulcrum debate, that you would hear fine oratory or good speeches or arguments that could persuade people. And sometimes that does occur. There are effective parliamentary speakers on all sides. People who are still in Parliament who were there when I was. For example, Frank Field speaks wonderfully well in Parliament. Ian Duncan Smith. Again, these are good parliamentary performers. But it isn't as it was 100 years ago, or even 50 or 60 years ago. Where it counts now is the television studio, the radio studio. That's where the debate is going on. And that's frustrating, I think, for backbench members of Parliament, because what they say in the House of Commons goes for so very little. And that, for me, is a shame. I mean, the work in Parliament now is done in the committees, in the corridors, not so much in the chamber.
So, allegedly, Giles, you spoke for 12 and a half hours for charity once.
I did.
I was just wondering on that, there's a lot of debate actually in politics as to whether, I know they do it in Congress quite a lot, whether you should filibuster.
Yeah.
And I know Jacob Rees-Mogg, as we just spoke about him, famously did that and has famously used long words to elongate his speech, such as flocky knocky nihilification. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. But he
didn't do badly.
I've been practicing all day. Do you think this should be allowed? Because obviously you're a massive fan of words, but do you think then it does disrupt the whole sort of work of the Parliament?
Several things to say. It's flocky nauky nihilification.
That's how you say it.
The action of estimating as worthless, a word Latin in its origin. And indeed, once in the House of Commons, I did manage to say that a slight inclination of the cranium is as adequate as the spasmodic movement of one optic to an equine quadruped utterly devoid of any visionary capacity, when I could have been more concise and have said, a nod's as good as a wink to a blind horse. And I think I probably was guilty of doing some filibustering in my time. Occasionally it occurs when it's to do with the parliamentary games that are played, and whether this is a good thing or not, I don't know. I'll give you an example. Why it happens is this. It's been agreed between the whips that the debate will go on till 10 o'clock. That's when the division will be, and that's when the people will be ready to vote. But sometimes you get shenanigans going on, and so that people can make the business collapse earlier than the agreed time of 10 o'clock, and nobody turns up to speak earlier, and so the business might collapse at 9 o'clock. There's no one there to vote. The vote is called, and the people wanting to bring down the bill or the point that they're voting on, they've arranged for their troops to be there, and they're ready to vote, and so a piece of business might be lost. In order, therefore, to keep the government business going, the filibuster is required to have someone to keep the thing going until 10 o'clock. That's the reason for the filibuster. And you could say, well, it can be justified because you're trying to secure the business of the government of the day. I don't know that games like that actually enhance government that much. I mean, people who are seriously interested in the fun and games of it, or the way it works, the reality of politics. When I was an MP, I kept a diary, and it's called Breaking the Code. It's just been reissued, Westminster Diaries, published by Pipeback. And it covers really the years from me becoming a candidate, getting selected, going through a general election, arriving at Westminster, where you really do feel like a new boy at school. You feel totally lost. I mean, I was terribly unhappy the first few days.
Really?
I mean, really deeply unhappy. It's what I'd wanted all my life. I was in my 40s, and yet I felt like a child. It was a miserable time.
Nervous, right?
And I was nervous. I felt lost. I thought, why have I done this? I felt it was all pointless. I was angry with myself. I wondered what I let myself in for. But gradually, I began to understand the way it worked, and in fact, I had, in many ways, the most rewarding professional time of my life. I ended up in the Government Whip's office, which is a very interesting place to be. Ended up as a Lord Commissioner of the Treasury. It's the Treasury Whip. It was completely fascinating. Anyway, there is this account of it called Breaking the Code, and people are kind enough to say that it is a good and accurate account of the reality of politics. And it's extended. It covers political life from 1990, goes really from the fall of Margaret Thatcher to the arrival of David Cameron. Includes the premierships of John Major and Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And it's quite, well, people say it does tell you about the muck and bullets, the harsh reality of what it's like being a backbench MP. And also, it takes you into the secret world of the government whip. So anyone who's listening to this who is studying modern politics, I hope Breaking the Code by me, Gyles Brandreth, Westminster Diaries, is on your reading list, because I think you'll find it quite intriguing. You don't need to buy it, you can borrow it from the library. And in fact, you should borrow books from the library, because if we don't use the libraries, we will lose the libraries.
Well, you have a fantastic 5-story library, actually, at Warwick.
Hey!
So, keeping the trend going.
Good.
You mentioned then about backbenchers, and that's been the subject of the EU debate at the minute, which I can't tell whether people are sick of or quite enjoying, because it seems to have gone on for a long time. What's your opinion on, firstly, have you made up your mind on how you'll vote? And secondly, on the campaign in general? You're obviously in the news recently for your hilarious dialogue on Have I Got News for You, where you summed up the campaign.
I've certainly got my coin ready to toss on the 23rd of June, if I can't make up my mind before then. When there was the last referendum, however many years ago it was now, 30 or more years ago, I was a young political activist in those days, and I was an admirer of Edward Heath, who was the Conservative leader at the time, and I was a very keen European, and led something called the People for Europe campaign to get celebrities to support joining the European Union, or staying in the European Union. Now, I have to say, I think it's much more closely balanced. And I would find it, as many people do, quite difficult to make up your mind. I don't like the idea of all the bureaucracy that exists, the great machinery that is the European Union. I don't like the lack of accountability, the remoteness of it. But at the same time, I do like the idea of being outward-looking and being part of something that's bigger than ourselves, and the idea of the single market. So I'm one of those people who is genuinely torn. I probably will vote Remain simply because of fearing something worse. But whenever I see them, the Brexit people, I always find them rather convincing and amusing. I like people like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove. I find them engaging to listen to. And John Redwood, they're articulate and good people. But I can't say that I've made up my mind.
And just the last couple of questions before the quick fire round.
Oh, there's a quick fire.
There's a quick fire round.
There's a quick fire round.
What was your proudest moment in politics, would you say? You were appointed a whip, and you had the Marriage Act, which allowed people to marry, not just in churches, wasn't it? It was sort of broadening the places where you could marry.
Now it's taken for granted. People can't remember what it used to be like. Before I introduced the 1994 Marriage Act, if you wanted a civil wedding, you had to go to a register office. And register offices were all in sort of county buildings, municipal buildings. And it was like getting married in a public lavatory often. They were just very dull municipal rooms, often really unattractive. And a constituent of mine came to see me. She owned a small castle, Pegforton Castle. And she said, well, if people can get married at Chester Cathedral, why can't they get married, which was my constituency at Chester, why can't they get married at Chester Castle, my castle, or, stately home, a beautiful hotel, historic house? And I agreed with her. And I introduced this legislation, which has changed the nature of marriage. There'll be people listening to this who are thinking of getting married, or who have got married, and didn't want a church wedding, weren't religious, but wanted a special venue. And it's thanks to my piece of legislation that they're able to get married in that way. So that's my one real claim to fame. But curiously, it's a major claim to fame, because if you look at the last 15 years, apart from that and the legalizing of civil partnerships and then gay marriage, there have not really been fundamental changes that 1,000 years or 100 years from now people will look back on. My other claim to fame is if you go to London and go to Trafalgar Square, you will see there is a plinth on which interesting modern works of art are positioned. This comes about because when I was a parliamentary private secretary to the Secretary of State for the National Heritage, I was walking, the offices were in Trafalgar Square, and I was walking to the office one day from Westminster, and I saw this empty plinth. And I thought, there's an empty plinth, we should put something on it. So I went in and I said, there's an empty plinth out there. Who's responsible? They said, well, I suppose we are. It's the Department of Culture. I said, good. Well, let's put something interesting on it. I said, I'm going to suggest we put Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Kangaroo, Eeyore, the whole lot. I said, they're British, they're marvellous, they've given more happiness than all the other, everybody else in the square. I said, Nelson, I know he was a hero, etc., but a lot of people killed in the Battle of Trafalgar. Winnie the Pooh's only ever done good in our life. And they said, you can't do that. The place is, Trafalgar Square is dedicated to military victories. Heroes of the Navy, the Army, the Sea. I said, oh, fine, we can't have Winnie the Pooh. We will therefore have Margaret Thatcher in her tank going across the Falklands with her scarf waving behind her, standing up in her tank, swinging her handbag. They looked completely shocked at that suggestion. So it was then decided, they agreed though, that there should be something on the plinth, and a committee was set up, and as a result of it we have these interesting bits of art that go on the plinth. So those are my two contributions to life as a result of being an MP. The 1994 Marriage Act and something on the plinth in Trafalgar Square. I have to say, once on radio I was doing an interview like this, and the interviewer described me as the expert on the Marriage Act. My wife was listening and she almost fell off her bunk.
And just a final question before our quickfire round. What would you say to, obviously we're a university radio station, what would you say to aspiring politicians and comedians?
Well, to aspiring politicians, I would say, go for it. I wanted to be a politician when I was very young. I was president of the union at Oxford, where I was at university.
And editor of the magazine?
And editor of the magazine, ISIS, and I directed the arts and all that. But I wanted to be a politician. And I met a lot of politicians at that time, and one of them, who became Chancellor of the Exchequer, a marvellous man called Ian MacLeod, he died young. I said, I want to be a politician. And he said to me, go away. Oh, that's not very nice. I was 22. He said, go away and do something, build something, make something, have a life, find yourself a wife, have some children, live a bit, and then come back and see me 20 years from now. And that actually was good advice. I think one of the problems with politics now is that people feel they've got to go in their 20s and they become political advisors and they work their way up the greasy pole that way. I think it stands you in good stead if you've had experience of the real world and then come back into politics having known reality. Otherwise you will spend the whole of your political career being told, what have you ever done in your life? And it's worth doing something in your life before you go into politics. But then when you do, you will discover, don't believe what you read in the newspapers, most of the people I've known in politics are good people committed to bettering the world in which they live, with, or whatever party they belong to, with ideals, good principles and commitment. It is a worthwhile life. Being a comedian, well, don't make me laugh. I don't know what that is about at all. I do shows now and again. I wouldn't really call myself a comedian. That is a funny idea. But people do seem to laugh during the show, I agree. But that's a tough life. It's a tough life. And when I began doing it years and years ago, all the clubs I would go and perform in, everyone smoked. So you have a lifetime in smoke-filled rooms. It was a very strong...
Not the same smoke-filled rooms as politics, mind you.
No, just cheap cigarettes as opposed to expensive cigars. So I've got no advice at all. I know nothing. So don't take any advice from me. In fact, my advice to you is become a banker. And if you can't become a banker, become a lawyer. And if you can't become a lawyer, become a vet. Because vets seem to like their patients, and the patients don't answer back. So be a vet. Boodles of money if you're a vet. It's very sought after. And also there are more female vets than male vets now. It's a good equal opportunities career. So that's my advice. Forget comedy. Certainly forget comedy. Forget politics for the moment. Be a vet, or a banker, or a lawyer, or an engineer. Yeah, the world is actually run fundamentally by the engineers. Or an accountant. If you're an accountant, you can do anything. You really can do anything. It's just a basic qualification. It then frees you up to do anything in the world. I have a daughter who's an accountant. And she's now she's an economist. But she was an accountant for a while, an economist. She then joined the civil service. You can do anything you like. Anything you like.
Oh, brilliant.
What are you going to do?
Well, I'd like to go into radio, ideally. That would be the ideal thing. But...
Oh, dear. Well, you're making a very good start.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, quick fire round. Who do you see as the next Conservative Party leader, potentially?
Well, it would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? I'm telling people I'm not running. Obviously, if they press me, if the call is that great, I might consider it. But I don't know is the answer to that. I think it does very much depend on the result of the referendum vote, how it goes. Very interesting. I have no idea. Maybe we'll all be surprised. But if required, obviously, I have to argue with my wife because she doesn't want me to do it anymore. But I'd be ready to serve again.
Who do you see as the next president of the US?
Well, I must say I'm fascinated by Donald Trump. The most amazing specimen. I'm so excited by his very existence. The idea, that Donald Duck and Woody Woodpecker had a love child at all is amazing to me. So I don't know what the result is going to be there either. I met Mrs. Clinton, which is quite impressive, and I met her husband, the most charming man I've ever met. So I don't know. I'm going to be tossing this coin a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinating. If you had to choose between Monopoly or teddy bears, which one would it be?
Teddy bears.
Teddy bears.
Yeah, yes, I'm a former European Monopoly champion, but Monopoly inevitably ends in tears. People fight over Monopoly. Every game of Monopoly ends in tears.
And was your father, am I right in saying, the first person to buy one from Selfridges?
In 1937, Christmas 1937, he bought a game of Monopoly, and through that he met my mother, and a few years later I was born. So yes, I owe my life to Monopoly. Even so, I prefer teddy bears, and all my teddy bears, I've got 1,000 of them, now live at something called Newby Hall in North Yorkshire, including the original Fozzie Bear.
Oh,
so
yes.
if you like the Muppets, that's the place to go. Newby Hall, North Yorkshire. Say hello.
Who is your political idol?
Goodness, my political idol. Who do I admire in politics? I think I admire Arthur Balfour. The reason being, he's the man who said, nothing matters very much. Most things don't matter at all.
Who was your best friend in Parliament?
I had lots of very good friends in Parliament on all sides. A very good friend of mine who'd been at university with me was a man called Stephen Milligan, who said, the house is now open. Do not cross the stage. No, this is telling us the show's about to begin. So I had a lot of friends in politics. I got on very well with Tony Benn because we both kept diaries. So people who keep diaries tend to stick together.
And just finally, could you tell us what happened on your train journey involving a public lavatory?
Oh, my goodness. I can't tell you about that, but it's because I'm on Twitter that you know about this, and I was so frustrated. I should have taken a photograph of it. Basically what happened is I was in the loo, and... no, I wasn't in the loo. I was trying to go to the loo. I pressed the button, and the door opened, and this poor man was in the loo, with his trousers around his knees, and he then tried to press the button to get out, but I pressed the button to close it, so he was pressing the button, he was actually opening it. Anyway, he got caught. I'm surprised that neither of us was arrested.
Thank you very much for joining me.
And can I say, Henry Riley, your future in broadcasting is assured. I still think you should become a vet, an accountant, a lawyer, or a banker, but if you want to go into radio, do. My name's Giles Brandreth, and you're listening to Raw.
Sorry, as my screen pops off for a minute there.
That's okay. It's better than the audience popping off. I've had people die in the audience. You're listening to Raw.
And that interview will be up as a podcast straight after the show now in about 5 or so minutes, as well as the whole show. So if you missed today's show and you've just tuned in, you're gutted that you missed it, it will all be up on YouTube. Everything that was said today.
I'm George Galloway, and you're listening to Raw. It's raw, and it's fantastic.